I never thought a pile of snow would turn my life into a legal battlefield. But when Brenda Morrison decided to weaponize winter weather against my house, she set off a chain of events that would expose the darkest secrets of our suburban Denver neighborhood. My name is Vincent Xavier, and I moved to the Pinewood Springs community in Lakewood, Colorado, about 8 months before the incident that changed everything. I'm a software developer who works remotely, which meant I spent most of my time at home in my modest 3-bedroom ranch-style house on Meadowbrook Lane. The neighborhood seemed perfect when I first toured it, with mature trees lining the streets, well-maintained homes, and what the realtor described as an active but reasonable HOA. That last part turned out to be the biggest lie I'd ever been sold. Brenda Morrison was the HOA president, a 47-year-old woman with severely bleached blonde hair cut into what I can only describe as the ultimate speak-to-the-manager style. She wore velour tracksuits in various shades of pink and purple, drove a white Cadillac Escalade with custom plates that read Hopres, and had opinions about everything happening within the 143 homes that made up our little slice of suburban hell. From the moment I moved in, she'd been watching me like a hawk watches a field mouse. The first violation notice came 3 weeks after I moved in. Apparently, my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. I'd left them out an extra few hours after the Tuesday morning pickup because I'd been on a work call that ran long. The fine was $50. The second notice came a month later because my grass was 2 3/4 inches tall, and the HOA covenant specified a maximum height of 2.5 inches. Another $50. By the time January rolled around and Denver got hit with its first major snowstorm of the season, I'd racked up over $400 in petty fines, each one personally delivered by Brenda with a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. The storm hit on a Friday night, dumping nearly 14 inches of snow across the Denver metro area. I spent most of Saturday morning clearing my driveway and sidewalk, making sure to follow the HOA rule that required all walkways to be cleared within 24 hours of snowfall cessation. I even went the extra mile and cleared the sidewalk in front of my neighbor's house, an elderly man named Carl who'd had hip surgery a few months back. By noon, I was exhausted, freezing, and ready to spend the rest of the weekend inside with a hot toddy and a good book. Sunday morning, I woke up to a strange scraping sound outside. I looked at my phone and saw it was barely 7 in the morning. Pulling on my robe, I walked to my living room window and felt my blood pressure spike instantly. Brenda Morrison was in my driveway, wearing a hot pink snow suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and she was shoveling snow directly onto the side of my house. I rushed outside in my slippers, not even bothering with a coat. The cold hit me like a physical slap, but my anger kept me warm enough. Brenda had piled at least 3 feet of snow against my vinyl siding, right where the house met the foundation. Water damage, potential ice damming, foundation issues, all of it flashed through my mind as I stared at the white mountain she'd created. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Brenda turned to me with that signature fake smile. "Good morning, Vincent. I'm simply relocating snow from the common area. According to Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA covenant, snow removed from common areas can be temporarily placed on individual lots until proper removal services can be obtained. Common area. This is from the street. That's municipal property, not HOA common area." Her smile widened, somehow becoming even more condescending. "The apron where the street meets the development entrance is technically HOA maintained. Therefore, it's a common area, I'm well within my rights. I looked at the massive pile again. You drove all this snow down here just to dump it on my house. There are empty lots. There's the retention pond area. Why here? Your property was most convenient, she said, already turning back to her Escalade, which I now noticed had a small trailer attached with more snow piled in it. Have a blessed day, Vincent. Oh, and do make sure that pile doesn't extend more than 18 inches from your foundation line, or that would be a violation. You have until Wednesday to remove it. She drove away before I could respond, leaving me standing in my slippers, soaking wet from snow, staring at the disaster she'd created. The pile wasn't just against my siding anymore. As I walked around to inspect it, I realized she'd also dumped snow against my basement window wells, completely burying 2 of them. If that snow melted and refroze, or if it just sat there compacting, I could be looking at thousands of dollars in water damage. I spent the next 3 hours digging out the window wells and pulling as much snow away from my siding as I could. My hands were raw despite wearing gloves, and my back screamed in protest with every shovel full. By the time I finished, I'd moved maybe half of what she'd dumped, and I was too exhausted to continue. I went inside, took a hot shower, and started researching the HOA covenant. It took me 2 hours of reading through the dense legal language, but I finally found what I was looking for. Section 7. Paragraph 3 did mention snow removal from common areas, but it specifically stated that snow could only be placed in designated collection zones, of which there were 3 in our development, none of them near my property. Furthermore, Section 12. Paragraph 8 explicitly prohibited any action by an HOA member or board member that could result in damage to another property owner's home. Brenda had violated her own rules. I documented everything. Photos from multiple angles, time stamps, measurements of the pile, screenshots of the weather report showing no additional snow had fallen since Saturday. Then I drafted an email to the HOA board, outlining the violation and demanding that Brenda personally remove the snow and pay for any damage caused. I sent it Sunday evening and copied every board member I could find email addresses for. Monday morning, I got my response. It wasn't from Brenda but from Dale Henderson, the HOA secretary and Brenda's most loyal supporter. The email was brief and infuriating. It stated that the board had reviewed my complaint and found it without merit. Brenda's actions were deemed appropriate under her authority as HOA president. Furthermore, I was being fined $100 for creating an unsightly snow pile that extended beyond the allowed distance from my foundation line. I had until end of business Wednesday to remove it or face additional daily fines of $50. I read the email 3 times, each time feeling my anger build like pressure in a kettle. They were actually fining me for the snow she had dumped on my property. It was beyond absurd. It was targeted harassment, plain and simple. I needed help, and I knew exactly where to get it. My neighbor across the street, Victor Chen, was an attorney who specialized in property law. We chatted a few times at neighborhood barbecues before Brenda had banned them for being too loud and creating parking issues. I walked over Monday afternoon and rang his doorbell. Victor answered wearing jeans and a University of Colorado sweatshirt, clearly working from home like me. "Vincent, hey, what's up?" "I need a lawyer," I said, "and maybe a friend who understands just how crazy our HOA president is." He invited me in, and I spent the next hour laying out everything. The petty fines, the snow dumping, the violation notice for snow she had put there. Victor listened carefully, taking notes on a legal pad, his expression growing darker with each detail. "This is textbook harassment," he said when I finished. and potentially property damage, depending on whether that snow causes any issues. The problem is, going after an HOA board is tricky. They have a lot of protection under Colorado law, and they're spending HOA funds on their defense while you'd be paying out of pocket. So I'm just supposed to take it. I didn't say that. Victor grinned, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from anyone in the neighborhood in weeks. I said it's tricky, not impossible. Let me do some research. In the meantime, document absolutely everything. Every interaction, every email, every fine. Build your case. I thanked him and went home, feeling slightly better but still angry. The snow pile sat there against my house like a white monument to Brenda's petness. I spent Monday evening digging out more of it, but the temperature had dropped, and the bottom layer had already started to freeze solid. I'd need to rent equipment or hire someone, which meant spending money I shouldn't have to spend. Tuesday morning, inspiration struck. I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee and staring at the snow pile through my window, when I remembered something Brenda had said. She'd dumped the snow from the common area, which meant she'd used her authority as HOA president to perform an action that violated HOA rules and damaged my property. If I could prove the damage was intentional, that changed everything. I went back outside with my phone and started recording video. I narrated as I walked around the pile, showing how it was still pressed against my siding, how the snow in the window wells had frozen into solid ice, how the sheer volume of snow indicated this wasn't just a convenient dumping spot, but a targeted attack. Then I had an idea that probably wasn't my best, but felt absolutely perfect in the moment. If Brenda could dump snow from common areas onto my property, then surely I could return it. After all, her front door wasn't protected by any specific HOA covenant I could find. And if she wanted to play games with winter weather, I was more than happy to join in. I called a landscaping company I'd seen working in the neighborhood and asked if they had equipment I could rent. They had a small skid steer with a bucket attachment available for $150 for 4 hours, delivered and picked up. I booked it for Wednesday morning. Tuesday night, I could barely sleep. Part of me knew what I was planning was petty and would probably escalate things. But another part of me was so tired of being pushed around by someone who abused their tiny amount of power. I kept thinking about all the small indignities I'd suffered since moving in, all the other homeowners I'd seen on the receiving end of Brenda's wrath. Someone needed to push back. The skid steer arrived Wednesday at 8 in the morning. The delivery driver, a young guy with a thick beard, gave me a curious look as he unloaded it. "You doing some winter landscaping?" "Something like that," I said, signing his paperwork. He went through the basic controls with me. I'd operated similar equipment before when I'd worked construction during college, so it came back quickly. By 8:30, he was gone, and I was alone with my plan and a machine capable of moving a lot of snow very quickly. I started with the pile against my house, scooping up huge bucket loads and driving them down the street. Brenda's house was 6 doors down, a large 2-story colonial painted pale yellow with white trim. Her Escalade was in the driveway, which meant she was home. Perfect. The first load I dumped right at the bottom of her porch steps. The snow fell in a heavy thump, spreading across the walkway she'd meticulously cleared. I went back for another load, and another. Each trip, I felt a little more justified, a little more energized. By the time I'd moved all the snow from my property, I'd created a mountain that completely blocked Brenda's front door and extended about 6 feet out from her porch. I was returning the skid steer to my driveway when Brenda came storming out her side door. She was wearing designer leggings and an oversized sweater, and her face was the color of a ripe tomato. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her voice carrying across the quiet morning neighborhood. "Relocating snow," I called back, shutting off the machine. "Just like you did. Common area snow can be temporarily relocated, right? You buried my front door. This is vandalism. This is harassment." I climbed down from the skid steer and walked toward her, keeping my voice calm and level. "Funny, that's exactly what you did to my house on Sunday. Only you buried my window wells and stacked snow against my siding where it could cause water damage. I just blocked your door. You've got 2 others. I'll have you arrested for this. Call them," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've got all the documentation showing what you did first, including your own email claiming you had the right to do it. I'm just following the precedent you set." Other neighbors had started coming out of their houses, drawn by Brenda's shouting. I saw Carol from 2 doors down, Marcus and his wife Jennifer from across the street, and old Carl leaning on his walker at the end of his driveway. They all watched with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed amusement. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she spun on her heel and marched back into her house through the side door, slamming it hard enough that I heard the frame rattle from where I stood. Victor appeared at my elbow. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen someone do to an HOA president. "Probably both," I admitted, "but I'm so tired of her acting like she owns everyone." "Well, you've definitely declared war. I hope you're ready for what comes next." The landscaping company picked up the skid steer an hour later. I spent the rest of Wednesday morning watching my email and waiting for the fallout. It came at 2 in the afternoon. An email from Brenda, copied to the entire HOA board and, from what I could tell, every homeowner in the development. The subject line was urgent, violent harassment by resident. The email was 3 pages long, single-spaced, and detailed what she called my unprovoked attack on her property. She claimed I'd used heavy machinery to create a dangerous obstruction that prevented emergency egress from her home. She stated that she feared for her safety and was pursuing legal action. The email concluded with an emergency meeting announcement for Thursday night to discuss my immediate removal from the community. I was reading it for the 3rd time when my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find 2 Lakewood police officers standing on my porch. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "Officers, can I help you?" The older of the 2, a woman with sergeant stripes, consulted a small notebook. "Are you Vincent Xavier?" "I am." "We received a harassment complaint from a Brenda Morrison. She claims you used construction equipment to block her front entrance and threatened her. Can you tell us your side of the story?" I invited them in and spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything, showing them the photos of what Brenda had done to my house, the HOA emails, and my documentation of the snow removal. The sergeant listened carefully, occasionally asking questions. The younger officer took notes. When I finished, the sergeant closed her notebook. "Mr. Xavier, did you threaten Mrs. Morrison in any way?" "No, madam. I told her I was relocating snow using the same justification she'd used and that I had documentation of her actions. That's all." "And the snow you moved, where did it come from?" "My property. She dumped it there Sunday morning." The sergeant exchanged a look with her partner. "Okay, this sounds like a civil dispute between you and your HOA. We're not seeing any criminal harassment here. The snow blocked a door, but she has other exits, and from what you've shown us, you were responding to similar actions she took first. That's for a civil court to sort out." Relief washed through me. "So I'm not being charged with anything, not by us. But I'd suggest you 2 work this out before it escalates further. Neighbor disputes can turn ugly fast." She handed me a card. "If anything else happens, give us a call. After they left, I sat down heavily on my couch. This was really happening. I'd actually escalated a petty HOA dispute into police involvement. Part of me felt vindicated that the officers didn't see what I'd done as harassment, but another part knew Victor was right. I declared war, and Brenda wasn't the type to back down. Thursday afternoon, I received another email, this one from Victor. He'd done some digging into the HOA's finances and governance, and what he'd found was concerning. There were several irregularities in how funds were being allocated, including payments to a property management company owned by Brenda's husband. He suggested I come to the emergency meeting that night and bring all my documentation. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse, a small building near the development entrance that usually hosted book clubs and yoga classes. When I arrived at 7, the parking lot was packed. It seemed like half the neighborhood had turned out for the show. I found Victor inside, and we took seats near the back. Brenda called the meeting to order from a table at the front of the room. The other board members flanked her. Dale Henderson, a thin, nervous-looking man in his 50s. Patricia Weaver, a retired school teacher who always seemed to agree with whatever Brenda said. And Frank Torres, the only board member who occasionally pushed back on Brenda's more aggressive tactics. There were about 60 homeowners packed into a room designed for 40, and the air was thick with tension and body heat. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Brenda began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We're here tonight to address a serious incident involving one of our residents, Vincent Xavier, who used violent and threatening behavior against me in my own home." A murmur ran through the crowd. I saw several people turn to look at me. I kept my expression neutral. Brenda continued, "On Wednesday morning, Mr. Xavier used construction equipment to pile snow against my front door, trapping me inside my home. When I confronted him about this dangerous and aggressive act, he threatened me and claimed he would continue to harass me. This is completely unacceptable behavior, and I'm proposing that the board vote tonight to begin proceedings to force Mr. Xavier to sell his home and leave our community." The murmurs got louder. Frank Torres held up a hand. "Brenda, we can't just force someone to sell their home because of a dispute. That's not how HOA law works." "We can under the harassment clause of our covenant," Brenda shot back. Section 19, paragraph 4 allows for removal of a homeowner who creates a hostile or dangerous environment. Victor stood up. "Excuse me, but I think we need more context here. Brenda, can you tell everyone why Vincent moved that snow to your property?" Brenda's face tightened. "That's irrelevant." "I don't think it is. Vincent, do you want to explain?" I stood up, my heart pounding. Public speaking wasn't my favorite thing, but I wasn't about to let Brenda's version go unchallenged. On Sunday morning, Brenda came to my house at 7 in the morning and dumped several cubic yards of snow directly against my siding and over my basement window wells. She claimed she had the right to do this under HOA rules. I filed a complaint, which was denied, and then I was fined for the snow pile she created. So on Wednesday, I moved that snow to her property using the same justification she used. That's the whole story. "He's lying," Brenda said immediately. "I never dumped snow on his property." "I have photos," I said, pulling out my phone. "Time-stamped, and video of you doing it. I also have the emails from the board denying my complaint and fining me instead." Patricia Weaver leaned forward. "Brenda, is this true? Did you put snow on his property?" "I relocated snow from a common area, which is within my authority as president." His response was completely disproportionate and threatening. A woman in the front row stood up. I recognized her as Susan Martinez, who lived on Oakmont Drive. "I'm sorry, but I've been watching the HOA board for 3 years now and I'm tired of this. Brenda, you've been targeting certain homeowners while ignoring the same violations from your friends. We all know it. And now you're trying to kick someone out of their home because they stood up to you. Several people voiced agreement. I saw heads nodding throughout the room. Brenda's face went from red to nearly purple. This meeting is about Vincent Xavier's actions, not about baseless accusations against the board. Victor stood again. Actually, while we're all here, I think we should talk about the board's actions. I've been reviewing the HOA's financial statements, which are public record. I found some interesting payments to Morrison Property Management. Brenda, that's your husband's company, isn't it? The room went silent. Brenda's mouth opened, but nothing came out for a long moment. Dale Henderson shuffled papers nervously. Finally, Brenda said, that company provides snow removal and landscaping services to the HOA at competitive rates. It was properly voted on and approved. Was it, though? Victor pulled out a folder. Because I can't find any record of that vote in the meeting minutes. What I do find is a series of payments starting 8 months ago, right around when you became president. Payments totaling over $40,000. For a development this size, that seems excessive, especially since we have contracted services with other companies for the same work. Frank Torres stood up, his face concerned. Brenda, I don't remember voting on any contract with Morrison Property Management. Dale, Patricia, do you? Dale wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Patricia looked genuinely confused. I remember something about updating our vendor list, but not a specific contract. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once, some demanding answers, others defending Brenda, many just shocked. I stood there feeling like I'd opened Pandora's box. I'd come here expecting to defend my snow relocation stunt, and instead we were talking about potential embezzlement. Brenda slammed her hand on the table. This is slander. Victor, I could sue you for defamation right now. It's not defamation if it's true, Victor said calmly. And I'm happy to show anyone here the financial records. They're available to all homeowners upon request, though the board doesn't exactly advertise that. A man I didn't know well stood up from the middle of the room. I want to see those records. I'm making a formal request right now. Me too, said someone else. I want a full audit, called out another voice. The meeting devolved into chaos. Brenda tried to regain control, but people were too angry, too loud. Finally, Frank Torres stood and spoke in a voice that carried over the din. Everyone, please. We need to handle this properly. I'm proposing that we suspend this meeting and schedule a special audit of the HOA finances. All in favor? Nearly everyone raised their hands. Brenda looked like she wanted to argue, but even Dale was raising his hand, clearly trying to distance himself from whatever was happening. The motion passed overwhelmingly. Meeting adjourned, Frank said. We'll notify everyone once we have an independent auditor lined up. In the meantime, all board decisions require a full vote of all members, no exceptions. Brenda, that includes any fines or violations. People started filing out, many stopping to talk in small groups. I made my way to Victor. What just happened? I think we just started a revolution, he said, looking somewhat dazed. I knew there were some questionable payments, but I didn't expect it to blow up like that. Susan Martinez approached us. Thank you, both of you. I've been trying to get people to pay attention to Brenda's behavior for 2 years, but everyone was too afraid of getting targeted. Maybe now something will actually change. Over the next week, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip and speculation. An accounting firm was hired to audit the HOA's books, and they requested 3 years of financial records, vendor contracts, and correspondence. I kept my head down and focused on work, but I couldn't help feeling like I was waiting for another shoe to drop. It dropped the following Wednesday, exactly 1 week after I'd buried Brenda's front door. I came home from a grocery run to find a letter taped to my door. It wasn't from the HOA, but from a law firm in downtown Denver. Brenda was suing me personally for harassment, property damage, and emotional distress. She was seeking $50,000 in damages plus legal fees. I called Victor immediately. He came over within the hour and read through the lawsuit carefully. "This is garbage," he said finally. "She's trying to intimidate you into backing down before the audit results come in. Don't worry about it. We'll file a response and counter-sue for her dumping snow on your property. Plus, with everything coming out about the finances, her credibility is shot." Will this actually go to trial? Probably not. Most of these things settle or get dismissed. But even if it does, you've got a solid case. Just stay calm and don't do anything else to give her ammunition. The audit results came back 3 weeks later. The accounting firm presented their findings at a special board meeting that was even more packed than the emergency meeting had been. I sat with Victor again, watching as the lead auditor, a stern woman in her 60s named Barbara Chen, walked the room through her findings. The news was worse than anyone had expected. Morrison Property Management had been paid over $120,000 over the past 3 years for services that were either never performed or were already covered under existing contracts with other vendors. Invoices had been falsified, work orders fabricated, and payments approved by Brenda without proper board votes. Furthermore, there were numerous fine payments from homeowners that had been deposited into HOA accounts but never properly recorded, suggesting that money had been skimmed off the top. Barbara's final assessment was clear. There was strong evidence of embezzlement and fraud. She recommended the board report their findings to law enforcement and pursue legal action to recover the stolen funds. The room sat in stunned silence when she finished. Then Frank Torres stood up. "Brenda Morrison, effective immediately, I'm calling for a vote to remove you as HOA president and suspend you from the board pending criminal investigation." All in favor. Every hand in the room went up except Brenda's and Dale's. Even Patricia Weaver voted yes, tears streaming down her face. Brenda stood abruptly, knocking her chair backward. "You're all making a huge mistake. I've given this community 3 years of service, and this is how you repay me. By listening to lies from some accountant who doesn't understand how HOAs work." "The police will sort out who's lying," Frank said quietly. "I suggest you get a lawyer, Brenda. A good one." Brenda stormed out, Dale scurrying after her. The meeting continued with Frank being elected interim president, and several homeowners volunteering to serve on a temporary oversight committee until a proper election could be held. Victor was elected to the board unanimously, something he clearly hadn't expected but accepted graciously. 2 days later, I was in my home office when I saw police cars pull up to Brenda's house. I watched from my window as officers knocked on her door, waited, then knocked again more forcefully. When Brenda finally answered, there was a brief conversation, and then one of the officers placed handcuffs on her wrists. They led her to the patrol car while her husband, a short, balding man I'd seen maybe twice, stood in the doorway looking shell-shocked. My phone buzzed with texts from various neighbors, all saying the same thing. Brenda had been arrested for theft and embezzlement. The HOA's lawyer had turned over the audit findings to the Lakewood Police Department, and they'd moved fast. Apparently, she'd been less careful than she thought about hiding the money trail. Over the following months, the full scope of Brenda's scheme came out. She'd been systematically defrauding the HOA almost from the moment she'd taken office. Her husband's property management company had been the primary vehicle, but there were also kickbacks from contractors, inflated fine assessments, and missing funds from the community's reserve accounts. In total, she'd stolen nearly $200,000. Her lawsuit against me was quietly dropped by her attorney, who probably realized it made his client look even worse. I considered counter-suing but ultimately decided against it. Victor advised that getting blood from a stone was difficult, and with Brenda facing criminal charges, any judgment would likely be uncollectible. I was just happy to be done with her. The criminal case moved through the system slowly, as they always do. Brenda initially pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her own emails, the falsified invoices, bank records showing deposits matching HOA payments going into accounts she controlled, all of it painted a clear picture. In month 9 after her arrest, she took a plea deal. 5 years in prison, restitution to the HOA in the amount of $187,000, and permanent ban from serving in any HOA or community organization leadership role. The sentencing hearing was in late September. I attended with Victor and about 20 other homeowners from Pinewood Springs. Brenda looked smaller somehow, diminished in her Orange County Jail jumpsuit. Her hair had grown out, showing dark roots, and the arrogance that had defined her was gone, replaced by something that looked like defeat. The judge was not sympathetic. She noted that Brenda had been in a position of trust and had violated that trust systematically and deliberately to enrich herself while imposing petty fines on the very people she was stealing from. The 5-year sentence would be served in the Colorado Women's Correctional Facility in Cannon City. With good behavior, she'd be eligible for parole in 3 years. As we left the courthouse, Susan Martinez walked with me to the parking lot. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Putting that snow on her door. If you hadn't done that, maybe none of this would have come out." I thought about it. I regret that it escalated the way it did. I wasn't trying to expose embezzlement. I was just tired of being bullied. But no, I don't regret standing up to her. Someone needed to. Life in Pinewood Springs improved dramatically after Brenda's removal. The new board, with Frank as president and Victor as vice president, implemented transparent financial reporting, reasonable enforcement of actual important rules, and a complete review of the HOA covenant to remove outdated or overly restrictive provisions. The grass height rule was changed to 4 inches, which meant I only had to mow every week and a half instead of twice weekly. The trash can visibility rule was eliminated entirely. Fine amounts were reduced across the board and required approval from 2 board members instead of 1. The HOA also filed a civil suit against Morrison Property Management and Brenda's husband. That case settled out of court for $80,000, which helped replenish the reserve accounts that had been drained. It wasn't full restitution, but combined with some of the assets seized from Brenda, the HOA recovered about 60% of what had been stolen. My own life settled back into a comfortable routine. Work continued as always. The benefits of remote employment, meaning neighborhood drama, didn't interfere with my paycheck. I got to know more of my neighbors in the aftermath of everything, finding that most of them were good people who'd just been trying to avoid becoming targets. Carl from down the street became a regular coffee companion, often walking over in the morning to chat about everything from politics to classic cars to the Broncos' latest disappointing season. About a year after Brenda's sentencing, I was outside doing some fall yard work when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out, looking uncertain. She was tall with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a University of Northern Colorado sweatshirt. "Excuse me," she called out. "Are you Vincent Xavier?" I set down my rake, suddenly wary. "I am. Can I help you?" "I'm Wendy Kimball," she said, walking up my driveway. "Brenda Morrison is my mother." My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice level. "Okay, what can I do for you?" She stopped a respectful distance away. "I wanted to come by and apologize for everything she did. To you specifically, but also to everyone in this neighborhood. I knew she could be difficult, but I had no idea what she was doing until she got arrested. My father is devastated. They're getting divorced, and I just needed to tell someone that I'm sorry. That her actions don't represent who I am or what I was taught to believe." I studied her face, seeing genuine distress there. "You don't need to apologize for her choices. You didn't do anything wrong." "I know, but I watched her become more and more obsessed with power and control, and I didn't say anything. I should have. Maybe if I'd challenged her earlier, she wouldn't have taken things so far." Wendy looked at my house, at the siding where her mother had piled snow over a year ago. "She told me you attacked her, that you were some kind of crazy person who was trying to destroy her. But when the truth came out, I realized she'd been gaslighting everyone, including her own family. I'm in therapy now, trying to process it all." "That's good," I said. "Therapy helps, and for what it's worth, I didn't set out to destroy your mother. I just wanted her to stop harassing me." "I know that now. The police and lawyers explained what really happened. She brought all of this on herself." Wendy pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. "I'm trying to track down everyone she targeted with excessive fines or harassment. My father wants to make things right as much as he can. He wasn't involved in the theft, but he profited from it indirectly, and he wants to pay back the people she hurt. Would you be willing to accept restitution?" I thought about the hundreds of dollars in petty fines, the stress and anger, the time spent fighting her. "Your father doesn't owe me anything. He thinks he does. Please, it would help him deal with his guilt." I gave her my email address, and we talked for a few more minutes about her mother's upcoming parole hearing in 2 years, and how Wendy was trying to rebuild her relationship with her father while maintaining boundaries around her mother. Before she left, she shook my hand. "Thank you for being kind. Most people would have slammed the door in my face." "You're not responsible for what she did," I repeated. "Don't carry that weight." After she drove away, I went back to my raking, thinking about accountability and consequences, and the ripples that one person's actions could create. Brenda had hurt dozens of people with her petty tyranny and theft, but she'd also hurt her own family, destroyed her marriage, and thrown away her freedom. And for what? The HOA funds she'd stolen had mostly been spent on designer clothes, expensive vacations, and home renovations that would now belong to someone else after the bankruptcy proceedings finished. A few weeks later, I received a check from Wendy's father for $850, representing all the fines Brenda had levied against me plus interest. I deposited it and donated half to a legal aid fund that Victor recommended, one that helped homeowners dealing with HOA disputes. The other half went into my emergency fund, replenishing what I'd spent on snow removal equipment and legal consultations. The second winter after the incident was peaceful. We got hit with several major storms, and the new HOA board contracted with a legitimate snow removal company that cleared common areas and helped elderly residents with their driveways. No one dumped snow on anyone's house. The covenant rules were followed reasonably. Fines were rare, and only for actual problems like someone leaving trash in the street for a week or a property becoming genuinely neglected. I found myself actually enjoying living in Pinewood Springs. The community started hosting events again, including a summer block party that drew almost everyone in the development. Victor and I became close friends, often grabbing dinner or catching Rocky's games together. Susan Martinez started a neighborhood watch program that was actually about watching out for each other rather than tattling on minor violations. In late November, about 18 months after Brenda's sentencing, Victor came over with news. "Brenda filed for early parole," he said. "The hearing is next month." Will she get it? Probably not. She's served less than 2 years of a 5-year sentence, and her behavior reports from the prison haven't been great. Apparently, she's been difficult with corrections officers and other inmates. "Shocking," I said dryly. We both laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. The parole hearing came and went, and as Victor predicted, it was denied. Brenda would have to serve at least another year before she could apply again. Life continued. The neighborhood settled into a comfortable rhythm. The HOA bank accounts were healthy again. Property values had actually increased once word got out that the dysfunctional board had been replaced with reasonable people. I ran into Dale Henderson at the grocery store one Saturday afternoon. He'd resigned from the board immediately after Brenda's arrest and had kept a low profile ever since. When he saw me, he looked like he wanted to run, but I walked over before he could escape. "Dale," I said, "how are you doing?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Okay, I guess." "Look, Vincent, I wanted to say I'm sorry for the fines, for backing Brenda up when I knew she was wrong. I was just trying to avoid becoming her target. I get it. She was intimidating. That's no excuse. I was on the board. I had a responsibility to the homeowners and I failed." He looked genuinely miserable. I knew something was off with those payments to Morrison Property Management, but I didn't want to ask questions. If I had, maybe we could have stopped it before she stole so much. "You can't change the past," I said, "but you can learn from it." That's all any of us can do. We talked for a few more minutes, and I could see some of the weight lift from his shoulders. Guilt was a heavy thing to carry, and I had no interest in adding to his burden. He'd been weak and cowardly, but not malicious. There was a difference. By the time the third winter rolled around, the snow incident had become something of a neighborhood legend. New residents would hear the story and look at me with a mix of awe and amusement. I'd become the guy who'd stood up to the tyrannical HOA president and accidentally exposed a massive fraud. It was weird being somewhat famous in my own neighborhood, but I tried to use it for good, encouraging people to attend board meetings and stay involved in community decisions. Victor ended up running for HOA president when Frank stepped down, citing wanting to spend more time traveling with his wife. Victor won easily, and he was everything Brenda wasn't: transparent, fair, willing to listen, and focused on building community rather than wielding power. Under his leadership, Pinewood Springs became the kind of neighborhood people wanted to move into rather than escape from. I sometimes thought about that Sunday morning when I'd watched Brenda dump snow on my house, and the decision I'd made to return it. It had been petty and vindictive, and I'd known it would escalate things. But it had also been necessary in a way. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it might backfire. Brenda had counted on everyone being too afraid or too apathetic to challenge her. When someone finally did, her entire house of cards collapsed. The lawsuit she'd filed against me had been officially dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile it. My counter-threat of suing her for property damage had been dropped as well, both sides agreeing to mutual dismissal. My homeowner's insurance had covered the minor water damage from the snow in my window wells, and the siding had been fine once it dried out. In the end, the physical damage was minimal. The emotional and community damage had been far more significant, but also more repairable. 3 years after the arrest, I attended another parole hearing for Brenda. Victor came with me, along with Susan and Frank and a few other homeowners. This time, Brenda looked different. Her hair was cut short and left its natural dark brown color. She wore the orange jumpsuit with less resentment than before. When it was her turn to speak, she stood and faced the parole board with something approaching humility. "I understand I made terrible choices," she said, her voice quiet. "I let power go to my head, and I hurt people who trusted me. I stole money that wasn't mine to take. I abused my position and destroyed my family and my reputation. I take full responsibility for my actions." She glanced at where we sat in the gallery. "I know apologizing doesn't fix what I did, but I am sorry, truly sorry." The parole board asked several questions about her rehabilitation efforts, her plans for making restitution, and how she intended to avoid reoffending. She answered thoughtfully, describing therapy sessions, financial literacy classes, and her acceptance that she would never be in a position of authority again. When the board asked if anyone wanted to speak, I surprised myself by standing. "Vincent Xavier," I said when they acknowledged me. "I was one of Mrs. Morrison's victims." I saw her flinch at the word victim. What she did was wrong, and she deserved to be punished. But she's served 3 years, and from what she just said, it sounds like she's done some genuine work on herself. I'm not saying she should or shouldn't be paroled, that's your decision. But if she does get released, I won't object. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life. I sat back down. Victor squeezed my shoulder in support. The hearing concluded shortly after, and we were told a decision would be made within 2 weeks. Brenda was led away, but before she left the room, she turned and looked directly at me, mouthing the words, "Thank you." I nodded once in acknowledgement. 2 weeks later, the parole board announced their decision. Brenda would be released in 30 days under strict supervision. She would have to complete community service, continue therapy, and was prohibited from serving in any HOA or community organization for the remainder of her life. Any violation of parole would result in immediate return to prison to serve the remainder of her sentence, plus additional charges. When she was released, Brenda moved to Colorado Springs, where her daughter Wendy had relocated for work. She got a job as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic, kept her head down, and focused on rebuilding her relationship with her daughter. Her ex-husband had remarried and wanted nothing to do with her, which seemed to be mutual. I heard updates occasionally through Wendy, who still sent me a Christmas card each year thanking me for not making things worse than they had to be. Life in Pinewood Springs continued to improve. The HOA covenant was officially amended to include strict financial oversight provisions, term limits for board members, and a whistleblower protection clause. Fines were capped at reasonable amounts and required documentation of actual harm or violation. The board met monthly with open meetings that any homeowner could attend, and minutes were posted online within 48 hours. 4 years after the snow incident, I was elected to the HOA board myself, serving as treasurer. It was something I never would have imagined when I first moved in, but the experience with Brenda had taught me the importance of community involvement. If good people didn't step up, bad people would fill the vacuum. So I stepped up, along with others who'd learned the same lesson. The neighborhood became known in the wider Lakewood community as a model for good HOA governance. Other developments asked Victor to come speak at their meetings about implementing transparency measures. The accounting firm that had conducted our audit used our case in training materials about detecting HOA fraud. We'd become a cautionary tale, but also a success story about community resilience and reform. 5 years after everything started, I was having coffee with Carl on my front porch when a moving truck pulled into the Morrison house. It had been sold finally, after sitting empty through the divorce proceedings and bankruptcy. A young couple got out of a car behind the truck, looking excited and nervous the way new homeowners always do. "Should we tell them the history?" Carl asked, watching them direct the movers. "Eventually," I said, "but let them settle in first. No need to scare them off." The couple, Ryan and Michelle, turned out to be great neighbors. When they eventually heard the story, they were fascinated rather than frightened. Michelle joked that at least they knew the HOA had been cleaned up and any skeletons were already out of the closet. Ryan, who worked in cybersecurity, even volunteered to help the HOA implement better digital record-keeping systems. I still lived in the same house on Meadowbrook Lane, still worked from home, still occasionally looked at the spot where Brenda had piled snow against my siding. The memory had lost its sharp edges, becoming just another story about that time I dealt with a difficult neighbor. The anger was long gone, replaced by something like bemused distance. People sometimes asked if I regretted moving to Pinewood Springs, given everything that had happened. The answer was always no. Every place has its problems, its difficult people, its challenges. The difference is whether you run from those challenges or face them. I'd chosen to face them, and in doing so, I'd helped create a better community for everyone. The snow came and went each winter without incident. The HOA maintained common areas. Neighbors helped each other. Fines were rare and reasonable. The reserve accounts were healthy and transparent. Board meetings were well attended and productive. All the things that an HOA was supposed to be, we finally were. On a cold December morning 6 years after the original incident, I was clearing my driveway when Victor walked over with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, handing me one. "Thanks." I took a grateful sip, warming my hands on the cup. Remember when doing this used to be stressful, worrying about whether the snow was cleared to the exact specifications. Remember when clearing snow meant potential harassment and fines. Victor laughed. "We've come a long way." "Yeah, we have." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over the snow-covered neighborhood. Kids were building a snowman across the street. Someone was walking their dog despite the cold. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Christmas lights twinkled on houses. It was peaceful and normal and exactly what suburban life should be. "I got a letter from Brenda," Victor said suddenly. "Well, the HOA did. She wanted to know if she could make a donation to the community fund, anonymously. Apparently, she's been saving money and wanted to contribute to the reserve account she depleted." "What did you say?" I brought it to the board. "We voted to accept it, but not anonymously. Transparency, remember. Her contribution will be listed in the financial records like everyone else's." She seemed okay with that. I thought about how far everyone had come. Brenda from tyrant to felon to someone trying to make amends. The neighborhood from fearful to empowered. Me from angry victim to community leader. All because of snow and stubbornness and the decision to push back against something wrong. "It's a good ending," I said finally. "It's a good continuation," Victor corrected. "The story's not over. Communities are living things. They require constant attention and care. We've built something good here, but we have to maintain it." He was right, of course. There would be new challenges, new difficult personalities, new problems to solve. But we had systems in place now and a community that knew how to work together. We'd learned our lessons the hard way. As winter deepened and the holidays approached, Pinewood Springs felt truly like home. Not because it was perfect, but because it was ours, shaped by our collective effort and commitment to doing better. The snow that had once been a weapon became just snow again, beautiful, cold, and temporary. Each spring, it melted away, leaving everything fresh and ready to start again. I never forgot what Brenda had done, but I also never let it define me or my relationship with my community. The petness that had sparked everything had burned away in the fire of consequences, leaving behind something stronger. We'd all been tested, and we'd passed, not perfectly, but genuinely. Years from now, when new residents moved in and heard the legend of the HOA president who went to prison for embezzlement, they'd hear about community involvement and transparency and the importance of standing up to bullies. They'd learn that one person's refusal to accept unjust treatment had sparked a change that transformed an entire neighborhood. And maybe, hopefully, they'd be inspired to stay involved, to pay attention, to care about the place they lived. As for me, I continued living my quiet life, working from home, maintaining my property to reasonable standards, and serving my community. The snow incident became a story I told at parties, always generating amazed reactions and follow-up questions. It was wild and petty and had escalated in ways no one could have predicted. But it was also real and human and ultimately hopeful. Because at the end of the day, communities are made of people, flawed and struggling and trying their best. When those people choose to work together, to hold each other accountable, to build something better than what they started with, amazing things can happen. Even in the suburbs, even in an HOA, even starting with something as simple and petty as a pile of snow,